Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. So we're starting off with the economy and the rather interesting decisions that the Biden administration is making heading into November. This headline coming from Americans for Tax Reform. Biden calls for a 44.6% capital gains tax rate, the highest capital gains tax since its creation in 1922. Tho Bishop from the Mises Institute joins me now to discuss. So, Tho, for those who maybe aren't as familiar like me in terms of like all of the tax ins and outs, what is the capital gains tax? Why does this matter? And what the heck is Joe Biden doing?
Yeah, so capital gains tax is basically a tax on the profit when you sell stocks, real estate, businesses, that sort of stuff. There's also an element to what Biden's calling for, which would actually have an impact on the inheritance tax as well. That would become a taxable event. That's very bad. Now, there is some unpacking here. For one, this is part of the president's budget proposal. This is largely a messaging document. Obviously, budget, when it comes to spending, when it comes to taxation, all of that originates in the legislature and in the House. So this is more of a messaging document for Biden. I think this is an attempt to tip the hat to some of the more progressive aspects of the base in a very easy way. But if this were to come to a place, right, this would actually create a capital gains tax over twice as high as China. It'd be the highest, again, that this tax has ever been, and be very bad for the economy. But again, that is nothing out of the ordinary for what we've seen from the Biden administration so far.
Well, so is the Biden administration just not really caring about the Americans that are already concerned about the economy? Or are they considering that maybe people who are wealthy enough to care about capital gains tax just won't be concerned about this? I mean, this seems like a very interesting and maybe not so smart proposal heading into an election year.
Well, I think they're counting on a few things. One is I think this is part of an attempt to portray the Biden administration, the Democrats, as being more serious about deficit issues. And unfortunately, with the spending that Republicans have allowed to go for quite some time, they're trying to say, okay, well, the issue with our deficit, the issue with our debt is that we're not taxing people enough. Right now, of course, that really comes down to priorities and the fact that, again, we've normalized various emergency levels of spending. We haven't gone back to COVID levels, right? That's an aspect to it, I think, from the rhetorical side of things. Hey, look, if you actually care about the debt, we're the grown-ups in the room, right? Because we're going to raise taxes. I think the additional element here is that I think that the billionaire class, right, which is predominantly controlled by Democrats at this point, right? This is a very progressive leaning class. I think a lot of them know that these proposals are never going to actually happen. And the kind of the middle class, the upper middle class, right? I'm not going to, that those are the ones that tend, the small business owners and the like, right? Those are the ones that typically vote Republican. They're the ones that would really be stressed by this. But they're kind of writing them off, I think, already there because of, again, all the other policies that the Biden administration has. Don't think you're going to win them over on economic issues. And the other side is just kind of, hey, look, you want to tax the rich, we're taxing the rich. And so I think, again, this is largely a rhetorical game. This is not something that I expect to actually happen. But I think they're trying to address the economy from these different ways. And of course, trying to distract from the actual consequences of their own policies when it comes to inflation, regulation, energy policy, and the like. So again, this is more of a campaign document, and I think it reflects where they're going to try to attack Republicans. And again, unfortunately, areas the Republicans have made themselves vulnerable on because of, again, just the very poor leadership that we've seen from alleged physical conservatives within the legislature.
Yeah, and that analysis is really fascinating to me because when I first read this story, To me, it appeared like this is a ridiculous position for Joe Biden because nobody other than maybe the Mark Cubans of the world who are posting proudly how much tax they're paying the IRS, and some of the Democrats who really want to be taxed more and suggest that that's totally fine. Any common sense person is looking at this thinking this isn't really a great way to deal with the deficit, deal with the economy, and yet to the Democrats, it seems like you're suggesting, this is actually just a messaging document. So how can Republicans combat this and actually show it for what it is?
Well, we need political will to actually address the other side of this equation, right? Which is spending. And again, the more that we spend, that is going to have to pay itself out, whether through inflation with again, monetizing the debt or through increased revenue coming in. And so until you address the spending side of things, again, there's been no political will on this for decades, right? This is a bipartisan problem. But if Republicans want to present themselves as actually being a physically conservative party, then we need to start getting serious about cutting the deficit, particularly when obviously it's a minority right now, but when you actually control the government, actually cut spending. And they haven't done this anytime. Actually, spending levels have gone up as high, if not higher, under Republican-controlled government with both the Senate, House, and presidency than anywhere else. And so, until Republicans get serious about the spending issue, then it's going to allow this narrative, right, where if we really want to be serious about our stuff, we've got to increase taxes elsewhere. Spending is where the necessity for any sort of revenue increases come from. So address that first. But again, unfortunately, we've seen a complete lack of will on this issue. So until we actually get Republicans the backbone on this, then this is going to continue to be theater. And unfortunately, none of that's going to be solved. We're going to continue doing what we're doing. We're going to inflate. We're going to do all this sort of stuff. Average Americans are going to be the ones that pay the biggest price. Again, until there's any sort of real faction serious about the spending side of our runaway federal government.
Yeah, we already saw, the Republican Speaker of the House that brought this ridiculous foreign aid spending package, even though they voted on the individual proposals that just added to the deficit and the debt. But that's the one criticism, as much as the Trump administration was great on the economy, everybody was just as a matter of fact well off. The one valid criticism of the Trump administration was that he added to the national debt. There wasn't, like, for example, Governor DeSantis's leadership in Florida that is reducing the debt in Florida and actually managing that budget well. And so, what does the Trump administration need to do potentially to reverse that kind of criticism of the administration heading into 2024? We've only got about 30 seconds left.
Well, unfortunately, Reagan did the same thing too, right? So, I mean, unfortunately, until you start, for one, just reining back, trying to get back to pre-2020 levels of spending would be a step in the right direction, and as a Herculean task. But eventually, we're going to you have to talk about entitlements, all these unfunded liabilities. Again, it's a complete mess. It's a mess, decades in the making. But until you get serious about it, until you're actually willing to take on these serious issues, again, America is going to be in the position that we are right now. It takes real leadership on these issues.
Yeah, and as you say, political will. Tho Bishop, thanks so much. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Well, out of all of the things that Americans should be concerned about politically, what about our environment? And I'm not talking just about Earth Day and globalism and climate change and all of that nonsense from the left, but actually what we consume and put into our bodies. So, this headline from the Washington Times says studies reveal plant based meat alternatives may not offer heart health benefits. A recent study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition suggests that opting for vegan meat products such as faux sausages and burgers does not provide a clear advantage for heart health and may even be associated with higher blood pressure in some cases. There was also a very interesting piece from The Blaze that talked about the epidemic of obesity in the United States. The headline is, "Why Are Americans So Fat?" A radical group of online scientists has a theory. So this group went on to say in this interview in The Blaze, quote, "The first mystery is the epidemic itself. For most of history, the obesity rate was about 1% to 3%, even when people had all of the food that they wanted. Today, many countries have a 40% obesity rate or higher. Even in quote unquote lean countries like Italy, France, and Sweden, the obesity rate is around 20%. The second mystery is how quickly the shift occurred. In 1975, there wasn't a single country on earth with an obesity rate higher than 15%. Wow. So joining me now is Egg Nationalist. He is an online anonymous sensation. So he joins us anonymously today and also the author of the Eggs Benedict option. So Egg, you've been following all of this for years. This is what your book is about what our current climate and environment actually is when it comes to things like obesity epidemics. When we talk about things like the hormone imbalances that we're seeing in so many Americans and just human beings in general across the planet. So, what's your reaction to these headlines?
It's great to be back with you, Jenna. So I think this headline from the Washington Times, the study is interesting. So it's a simple study. It was an 8-week intervention study. They took a group of people, split them in half. They let one half continue eating their normal diet with meat in it, and with the other half, they took out the meat and they replaced it with these new plant based alternative meat products, things like Impossible Burger, and that kind of stuff. And what they found was that at the end of 8 weeks, actually, the people who had the supposedly healthy substitution of these plant based meats, they ended up with a much higher resting blood sugar level, which is indicative of insulin resistance, and it's the first step really on the road to being diabetic. I mean, I'm not surprised by this. Obviously, I write about this a lot, and I know exactly what these plant-based meat substitutes are. They're not meat substitutes; they're just processed food. It's another name for the worst kind of food that people eat today, and Americans and people throughout the developed world now consume a majority of their calories. The average person now consumes the majority of their calories from processed food. So the idea that these meat substitutes are a healthy option is absolute nonsense, and I just think this study underscores that, and hopefully it will get some publicity, and people will actually start to think about what these products actually are. They are not substitutes for meat at all.
Yeah, and for people who want healthier alternatives, the branding and marketing around a lot of these vegan or plant-based alternatives seem to be healthier because when are plants not more healthy, or the healthier alternative when we've been told for years that we should eat organic, eat your fruits and veggies, all of these things. So is the marketing itself insincere?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's the marketing's insincere. Firstly, because these things aren't just simple alternatives to meat products. I mean, it's not like choosing lamb instead of beef, or chicken instead of pork, or whatever. They're not like for like products. And actually, you see in certain countries, for instance, in places like France, then the legislature has actually banned the use of certain words by these plant-based alternative manufacturers. You're not allowed to call oat milk milk. You're not allowed to call plant-based meat meat. You're not allowed to call vegan sort of dairy alternatives cheese, because actually they're not those things. So I mean, in France at least, and they've got the right idea. But as you say, we've been conditioned for decades and decades now, for the better part of half a century, maybe more, to believe that meat is bad, and that any kind of alternative that involves plants, that's made of plants, is going to be better for us, when actually the opposite is the case. I mean, this isn't like substituting meat for a salad or something, for a freshly made salad. This is a heavily processed product that is packed with additives, extra sugars, salt. I mean, all of these things are necessary to make this kind of food palatable, because actually it wouldn't taste of anything. It would be, I mean, it's pretty disgusting anyway now, but it would be even worse if it weren't full of artificial flavorings, extra salt, extra sugar. And in fact, studies show that these products over time, as the years pass, then they just have more and more stuff added to them because the flavor isn't satisfactory, and so it just becomes more and more heavily processed. But yes, I mean it's a lie wrapped in a deception, really.
And you wrote an article, probably about a year ago, roughly, that you and I had discussed on my radio program. That was talking about lab grown meat as well. And people think that this type of new science is innovative, and it's a way to preserve the animal population. So PETA is all happy and all that. But your article actually suggested that the type of product itself was actually was cancer. I mean, it's really disgusting when you get down to what these products actually are.
Yes, well, I mean, we need to distinguish between the plant-based meats, which are just made of plants. There are no animal products, and then something like lab-grown meat, which is actually animal cells. So it is, in some sense, it is actually meat. But what it is as well is it's a totally different type of animal cell. So it's made from animal cells known as immortalized cell lines, and these are used widely in medicine for the development of vaccines. They are basically cancerous cells, and the first immortalized cell lines were taken from a woman called Henrietta Lacks, an African American woman who was had a
Wow.
uterine tumor, and she died at Johns Hopkins in
And we're gonna have
Baltimore.
to
And they
take a break here. I'm so sorry to cut you off. So we're against a hard break, but we'll be right back to continue the conversation with Raw Egg Nationalist right after this. Continuing my conversation with Raw Egg Nationalist, who is the author of the Eggs Benedict option and is an anonymous account on social media just to preserve his own identity. And Raw Egg, we were talking before the break. You were describing the difference between, of course, the plant-based meat alternatives versus lab-grown meat, and how lab-grown meat is actually animal product, but it's using these types of cells. So go ahead and continue where you were going with that.
Yeah, of course. So basically, what lab grown meat is it's a type of animal cell that humans have absolutely no history of consuming. For 200,000 years, we've eaten animal products, but we haven't eaten this particular kind of animal cell that is cultivated in a particular way, that's extracted and stored and replicated in bioreactors. This is a totally new thing, and again, there's a deception involved because people are told, look, this is just a lab grown chicken breast is just a chicken breast. It just doesn't, it's not grown on a chicken. But actually, that's not the case. This is a totally new way of producing meat using a totally new type of cell that's never been in the human food chain before. And actually, quite tellingly, the companies that make these products do not want people to know that they're using immortalized cell lines. They don't want people to know what immortalized cell lines are. They don't want them to know that they replicate endlessly, exactly like cancer, and that there are specific dangers involved with lab grown meat for that very reason.
And this is just really disgusting, quite frankly, when you get down to it. What is being put in our food, all of these over processed additives, what we're consuming under the guise of this being healthy. And, I'm not for over regulation in terms of the government, but it does seem like if the FDA is remotely doing its job, there should be some parameters of what can be sold to the consumer under these marketing and branding to suggest that this is somehow even is supposed to be consumed by humans, much less something that is actually healthy for us. And so, where is the FDA on all of this?
Well, the FDA is working hand in hand with these companies to approve their new products. I mean, I've written detailed exposés of one company in particular that manufactures lab-grown meat. It's a company called Good Meat that's part of Eat Just is the broader corporate umbrella. And yeah, I mean they've been working hand in hand with the FDA to get these products approved. And if you look at actually what goes on in the FDA approval process, it's quite incredible. They just don't ask questions. They don't ask obvious questions. One of the things that I actually picked up in the FDA the filings, the FDA filings that Good Meat made for their lab grown meat product, is that the product is being manufactured, or it was being manufactured, by a company that actually has links to China's biological weapons program. It's incredible. I wrote about this last year. The FDA really should be taking a critical stance. They should be asking questions. But the way that the FDA's process of approval works is that actually you can just go to them with your own safety data, and you can say, look, here's our safety data that we've done on this product we want to sell. What do you think about it? And most of the time the FDA will say, yeah, that looks fine. And that's what's happened with lab grown meat and with these plant based meat alternatives, some of which contain genetically modified ingredients. Impossible Burger, for example, contains genetically modified ingredients, and most people don't know that. So yes, I mean, there's over-regulation, but there's under-regulation too. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a definite case of under-regulation.
It appears so. So, if the FDA isn't asking the right questions and they're kind of just turning a blind eye to this, what are the questions that the average consumer should be asking?
Well, I think with all food products that you buy, the best thing you can do is to inquire into the provenance. I mean, the easiest way to avoid consuming bad food is to buy local. Really, I mean, find some trusted producers, local farmers, local food producers, and buy from them, and that will eliminate so many of the problems that come with just buying food prepackaged in the supermarket. Not only will you get a superior product, a healthier product, a product that's free from unpleasant additives, that's produced in an ethical manner, but you'll also you won't be reliant on these big corporations. You won't be supporting these big corporations, and and your health will benefit as a result. I mean, processed food is one of the principal causes. So that's food that's prepared outside the home in factories, that's wrapped in plastic and sold to you in the supermarket. That's a minimal definition of processed food. Processed food is one of the principal causes of the current obesity and health crisis. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So if you can get back to buying locally produced, locally grown, locally reared food, you'll be well on your way to recovering your health and protecting your health and the health of your family and your loved ones.
And going back to the article from the Blaze that talked about that since or back just in 1975, there was no country in the world that had an obesity population greater than 15%. I mean, that is in stark contrast to what we're seeing, especially in Western societies. Beyond processed foods, what else do you attribute that to?
Yeah, it's quite shocking, and they say in the piece, the study of obesity is the study of mysteries, because it's so there's no obvious single explanation. I mean, of course, people overeat, and we know, there's a thermodynamic reason why overeating makes you overweight. But it's not just about people overeating. It can't just be about people overeating. I think one of the principal causes is stress. Uh, we're under conditions of chronic stress in the modern world, and stress has terrible effects on the body, on the metabolism, etc. And then we've got to talk about things like endocrine disruptors, toxic chemicals in the environment. Many of these chemicals are estrogenic, which means they mimic the female hormone estrogen in the body and its effects, and they're also obesogenic, which means that they do things to the body's metabolism. In particular, they can make you store fat differently. They can alter the body's metabolic rate. So, for example, an obesogenic compound like BPA might lower the body's metabolic rate so that you can actually put on weight without eating more. You're on the same diet, eating the same amount of food, but your body's metabolic needs have decreased ever so subtly. And then you're putting on weight,
Yeah.
eating the same amount of food. And that kind of
And
thing, I
we
think, is
we've got to
happening.
leave it there, raw egg nationalist. But so appreciate your insights, and we could do a whole hour on all of this stuff. So you should follow Raw Egg Nationalist, get his book, The Eggs Benedict Option, and read a lot of these very in-depth pieces that he writes. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Well, the question of pro life initiatives heading into 2024 has been considered by Republicans and conservatives across the country, but also by the left in the wake of the Dobbs decision. And most of the ground here really being waged on the battleground at the state level. And we're seeing even in Florida with Amendment 4 that is being proposed to override the legislative heartbeat bill that was passed and signed by the governor. So, what should conservatives be doing to reject the leftist rhetoric that pro life isn't the extreme position? It's actually the extreme position that the Democrats are taking to allow abortion up until the moment of birth or even moments after birth. Joining me now to discuss is Emily Davis, who is with SBA Pro Life America. And Emily, how do you see the battleground here in the United States, especially heading into November?
Yeah, I mean, I really see these ballot initiatives as just fodder for the Democrats, particularly the pro abortion side, and Biden and Harris as just this fountain of misinformation and fear mongering. It is absolutely pathetic if you have to lie to women to try to claw back votes, but we see that's exactly what we're doing. I mean, in Ohio alone, we look at that ballot initiative, and they were telling women that you couldn't get miscarriage care unless you voted for that ballot initiative. They even had to have the AG come out and say, that is totally a lie. And you brought up Florida. That's a really good example. Governor DeSantis recently called out a reporter, I think it was a local reporter there in Florida, who was trying to say, oh, no, 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 this ballot initiative doesn't strip parental consent. And Governor DeSantis said, did you read it? Absolutely, it does. It says notification. That means that you can it's not consent, it's after the fact. So the child gets, or the minor gets the abortion, the parents don't know, and then they may be notified afterwards. So we have got to do all that we can to help people understand what are in what messaging, what wording, what things are going to be enacted after these ballot initiatives go through. And a good thing that Governor DeSantis pointed out is if it's confusing to you, if it's confusing to these reporters, why are we going to hardwire it into the Constitution?
Yeah, really well said. And I think that Governor DeSantis is an excellent example of how to stand up firmly for pro life and to rebut these reporters' ridiculous readings and misinformation by very clearly parsing the actual text. But this means that he read the bill for himself and he was well equipped to handle those reporters' questions. And a lot of times it seems like even very well meaning conservative and pro life voters approach some of these initiatives asking questions almost on the way to the ballot box or as they're filling out their ballot to return in the mail. And they don't take the time or perhaps don't have time to actually read through it meaningfully. I think that we need to change that. Do you?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. One of the things that we found after these ballot initiatives is that people really made their minds up early on. And that early on message came from the pro abortion side and the Democratic side. You have ACLU and Planned Parenthood pumping tens of millions of dollars into these ballot initiatives, and they're setting the message early on. We have got to do all that we can, and we encourage everyone in the GOP, everyone that's pro life, to get out and make sure that you educate the public on what these ballot initiatives actually mean. And then what you'll see afterwards once they're enacted. One of the things that is completely egregious is in Ohio. Another great example of this is, the ballot initiative went through, and now you're seeing them strip informed consent laws or proposing to. I mean, they would have never admitted to that beforehand, but we were raising the red flag on these things. I mean, it's one thing, it's terrible. They don't care about the baby, but also not even wanting to grant women informed consent on what the abortion is actually going to do. This is all in service of Planned Parenthood and abortion as an act.
Yeah, and I hate how they frame it, Emily, as women's rights. I mean, it's certainly not at all pro women to not require informed consent, to not care about the extreme medical harm to the woman, not to mention the child who is intentionally killed in the abortion process. But even if they are solely concerned about the mother, I mean, there are so many different ways that this is not about women's rights. And we're seeing even the Biden administration that, reinvented the Title IX stuff to allow for so-called trans women in locker rooms and in bathrooms and women's sports. I mean, all of these things. The left isn't about women's rights at all. So why are we ceding that narrative to them for them to be able to claim that they're pro-women and somehow conservatives are the ones that are, antiquated and all about the patriarchy when that's just false?
That's completely false. I mean, you're right. But clarity is so important. The left is not providing it on this issue for a reason. That's why we are encouraging Republicans to take that ground. Since the left has ceded it, be clear on where you stand. Be compassionate for both mom and child, because the other side is only recognizing the woman, and not even in a caring way, because they don't want her to have informed consent. They don't want her to understand the ballots completely. And so this is a real opportunity. It makes me think about the Gavin Newsom ad that just came out about cops pulling women over and forcing pregnancy tests. Why are we not responding to these absurdities? We have got to call out these lies. And like I said, if they have to fearmonger women to claw back votes because they're so desperate, that is absolutely pathetic. And we should not leave those things unanswered.
Yeah, and Emily, you mentioned earlier how Planned Parenthood and these other leftist organizations are putting a lot of money into ballot initiatives and other messaging to try to undermine the pro life cause and advance their progressive agenda. Where is the funding from conservatives to combat this? Where are the initiatives potentially heading into 2024? I mean, is there enough that we're doing that is going to try at least to rebut all of this from this deluge that's coming from the left?
Yeah, this is a great point. In fact, we actually just saw Planned Parenthood's annual report come out. $2 billion in total from their last annual report. And a huge chunk of that was taxpayer dollars. So just think about that. And another key point is, too, they also donate hundreds of millions to the Democratic Party. So there is an incentive loop happening here. People forget this is a business. So they have tons and tons of money. And that's why we have to do everything we can to combat that, not just with the message to make it clear, but also with the money to make sure that we get the message out.
Yeah, so well said. And it is really frustrating when people don't understand that it is a business to them. And even though the left has, this wonderful way of trying to be winsome and they have all of these great tear-jerking messaging points, they're not actually interested in women. They're not actually interested in policy. They're looking to reinvent and reimagine America as they see it, which will actually be worse and worse for women. So, Emily Davis, really appreciate your insights. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Well, Colorado Democrats are always just wonderful examples of extreme idiocy. And there has been nothing better in recent weeks than this apparent memo that was sent by Democrats to Republicans in the legislature that my good friend Jeff Hunt posted. And this appeared to just be a Word document. So I'm going to ask him about how he obtained this. But this is what this Word document said. In 2021, the Biden administration issued a memo to the Executive Office for Immigration Review establishing terminology. The Library of Congress adjusted their language in 2016 by ceasing to use the term illegal alien because it is a pejorative. And several U.S. Supreme Court cases also established use of the term non-citizen instead of alien because they are statutorily equivalent, but only one of those terms is associated with hate groups. So the following terms are no longer used. They say you can't use alien, illegal, illegal alien, undocumented alien, invader or invaders, interloper, squatter, fresh off the boat. Instead, words that are acceptable, according to Colorado Democrats: migrant, immigrant, undocumented person, non-citizen applicant, immigrant / immigration without authorization, new arrivals. They didn't put newcomer. I wonder why. So this document ends with, it is also unacceptable, dehumanizing, and inaccurate to describe immigration as a, quote, invasion or as a horde, and to describe whole groups of people as criminal or anchor babies. Joining me now is Jeff Hunt, who posted this document on his X feed. And Jeff, I would love to just, appear by Zoom from the great state of Florida, because I have no desire to go back to Colorado, and just use all of these terms just to trigger the leftists. So how did you come across this document?
Yeah, it was given to me by House Republican lawmakers. But look, if a House Republican uses any of those terms during debate, they are gaveled down by the House Speaker and told to stop speaking. It's amazing. Look, the left has finally found some police they don't want to defund. It's the thought police, and they want to control everything that Republicans say on the floor of the House here in Colorado. But if I was a Republican, here's what I would do. I'd pass out back to the Democrats two words that they would like everybody to say on the floor of the House in Colorado: Laken Riley, right? That's what they should be saying and talking about. No, the idea that we cannot talk about the most pressing issues that are facing Coloradans is shocking. Imagine this. Imagine calling 911 and the operator criticizes you for the language and the grammar you're using, not the fact that your house is on fire. And what do I mean by the fact that our house is on fire? We have 40,000 illegal immigrants in the city of Denver that are costing the city $90 million. Just this week, lawmakers had to allocate $24 million from the state budget to serve illegal immigrant students in our public schools. And they want to set up even more grants to deal with the illegal immigrants. We have a crime problem. We have a housing problem. We have illegal immigrants coming into our schools and creating a whole sorts of problems there as well. And rather than even being able to talk about it and address it, the thought police want to control the words of House Republicans down at the state capitol. It goes to show where their priorities are. They're more concerned about making sure you don't offend lawbreakers that are here in our country illegally than they are serving the actual citizens of the state of Colorado. That's where their priorities actually are. And you see it on full display down at the state capitol.
It is amazingly hypocritical to me that the Democrats are trying to censor the speech of House Republicans and not allow free and fair debate. And absolutely accurate that they want to continue to fund the thought police and they want to compel only the terms that they prefer, when on the same hand, Democrats are the ones that famously try to make terms vague, reinvent new meanings for different words. And the only reason they're doing this, Jeff, is so that they are handicapping and am I allowed to say that anymore? Or is that like some phrase that, I have to say they're speaking challenged, maybe, they're trying to handicap the House Republicans from actually articulating their position on illegal aliens, just because they know that then Republicans are going to focus on that instead of the issue at hand. And so what recourse do House Republicans have then if they're just gaveled down because, hey, you're a bigot, you're a hater, you can't use these words on the House floor? It's insane.
Well, there's growing anger. And just in fact, today, Rose Puglisi, the House Minority Leader, led all of the House Republicans up into the well to make their positions known on this, that you are restricting free speech. But Jenna, think about where the Democrats' concern with regards to compassion are. They feel like if you use the wrong words, then you're really not being a compassionate person. Meanwhile, you have unaccompanied minors being trafficked across the border in what could only be described as hell in what they're experiencing, and they won't even debate that issue. They're far more concerned about the words you're using. Give me a break. There's real people suffering here, real lives at stake here. Allow the Republicans to put forth policy agendas. Who cares what words they're using? The word illegal immigrant is not a pejorative. Being an immigrant is not a pejorative. And
And even
illegal
if it
just
is, so
describes
what?
your,
I mean, have
yeah,
they heard the
right.
founding fathers and all of the rhetoric that, everybody has used all the time? I mean, have they heard some of the stuff that's come out of Joe Biden's mouth? I mean, this is so ridiculous. And they've clearly never heard, that old axiom, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. I mean, come on, words are now harm now. It's so stupid.
Yeah, words are violence. I think we've heard that from other leftists as well. No, I mean, and you can even go back to Shakespeare, right? A rose by any other name is just as sweet. We're having conversations about real people, their lives, getting into a semantic debate and gaveling down Republicans because you don't like their terminology. It's a distraction from the real issues here. And it just shows that Democrats have no idea how to lead. They can't actually solve problems if this is what you're actually concerned about.
Yeah, really well said. And it seems that they want this distraction and they want the House Republicans so focused on the language that they're not allowed to use, that they're not actually focused on the legislation and the merit of the case, because leftists are so good at distracting Republicans from the core issues. Need to keep our eye on the ball. But Jeff Hunt, really appreciate it. That's all the time that we have for Jenna Ellis tonight. Make it a great weekend.